Hi, this is Ira Gorlick, and this lecture is on duopolies and the oligopolies. So the oligopolies. Oligopoly refers to a market with just a few sellers. A duopoly is a market with only two sellers. A duopoly is the most basic form of oligarchy. A duopoly can have the same impact on the market as a monopoly if the two players collude on prices and output. Boeing and Airbus have been called a duopoly for their command of the large passenger airline market. Amazon and Apple have been called a duopoly for their dominance in the e-book marketplace. And from the beginning of cellular until around 1997, cellular was a duopoly. And in fact, the reason I bring it up here is that telecommunication, while not necessarily a duopoly, is certainly an oligarchy when you consider that there are only 3 or 4 players out there: AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, Time Warner, Charter. There's only a few players out there, and in any one market there may only be a couple of players. For example, for me, the only 2 wireline companies that I could go to for my internet service would be Comcast and AT&T. Oligopolies interact amongst themselves. When an oligopolist changes a price, it must take into account how other firms in the industry will respond. Within an oligopoly, the product can be similar or differentiated, and oligopoly markets have high barriers to entry. So cellular telephone. We have just a few players in the cellular telephone market. And when I actually started in cellular in the early 80s, there were only 2, an A side and a B side. And we're going to talk more about that when we talk about some of the competition in the telecommunications market. There were only 2 carriers, and I was on the A side with GTE, though we had some B side markets. And we would often look at what the other guy was doing and price accordingly. So oligopolies have strong incentives to collude because while acting together, they can restrict output and set prices so that economic profits are earned. The individual oligopolist has an incentive to cheat because the firm's demand curve is more elastic than the overall market demand curve. And by secretly lowering prices, the firm can sell to customers who would not buy at a higher price, as well as to customers who would normally buy from the other firms. Oligopolist agreements tend to be unstable due to their conflicting tendencies. So obstacles to collusion within oligopolies include low entry barriers. Particularly as time goes on, more firms will be attracted to the potential economic profits, which will not be sustainable. For example, the OPEC's raising of oil prices during the 1970s and early 1980s enticed more non-OPEC producers to produce more. The market share of the OPEC producers was drastically reduced, and they had to reduce prices in order to gain market share. In the long run, cartels are not usually successful at raising prices. Antitrust laws. These laws prohibit collusion. Although firms may make secret agreements, those agreements will not be enforceable in a court of law. And this actually goes to transparency, why we need transparency. Unstable demand conditions. These conditions will make collusion more difficult as firms are more likely to have disagreements as to what the best direction of the industry. Some may expect large increases in demand, while others may disagree and prefer that the industry capacity remain the same. An increasing number of firms. An increasing number of firms in an oligarchist industry will make agreements harder to discuss, negotiate, and enforce. Differences of opinion are more likely. As the number of firms in the industry increases, the industry will behave more like a competitive market. Difficulties with detecting and stopping price cuts. These difficulties will undermine effective collusion. Sometimes oligopolist firms will cheat by enacting quality improvements, easier credit terms, and free shipping. If quality changes can be used to compete, collusive price agreements will not be as effective. And as part of this oligarchy thinking, I want to go over a classic game theory discussion in economics called the prisoner's dilemma. And this should helpfully bring some insight into how this works. Thank you.